That's actually a sharpener.
What, the blue thingy?
Yeah.
Oh, so cute.
So Popeye doesn't know what to get me sometimes for my birthday or Valentine's Day or whatever. So he just walks into ArtStation and buys a bunch of stuff and he assumes that it'll work.
Stationery
And it
is the
does.
best.
Yeah.
The best.
Easiest.
Yeah.
Your shell ring is so pretty.
They're both shells, Ira. Did you see? This one is cut
And then put
and
in a...
polished, and this one is just a regular cowrie. Thank you.
What I actually want to write is not camera appropriate. So I have written another thing.
Which is camera appropriate?
Which is mostly camera appropriate. I also really love these pens. Did you get a good one?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Hi Anissa, welcome to The Curious Case Of. Thank you for being here. I don't really introduce my guests in a conventional manner because I don't like giving people a title. Also, what title am I supposed to give you in this context? And we're all so many things. So professionally, Anissa does interior design and styling things. But right now, she's here as someone who has been a caregiver for someone who lives with a mental illness for very long. So you've mentioned to me that your son got diagnosed at 9. Mm-hmm. So what were the signs? What made you realize, okay, let's go to a doctor?
So my son was diagnosed at 9, like you just mentioned. And we noticed he was getting anxious and angry and doing a lot of what I later discovered was ritualistic cleaning, organizing, that kind of thing a lot. It was primarily around his school items, his backpack, his books, his water bottle, his shoes. Anything that went to school and came back was then by him deemed dirty or unclean and had to be cleaned. So that's when we first noticed that that's a little pronounced and what's going on. And earlier we thought he was just a little nervous to go to school or anxious to go to school, which some kids do get anxious and there's school avoidance. But it became more and more about cleaning and cleanliness. And we sort of let it go and kind of said, it's fine, and played it a little cool and didn't give it too much importance till it became too distressing for him. And we realized that, okay, this is really quite pronounced and we need to do something. And one day he came back from school, I think it was from school, and he was not speaking. He was not responding at all. And I got a bit worried and freaked that, okay, the child is not responding to anything. And what I later discovered was that he was in freeze. There's fight, flight, freeze. And he was in freeze where he was just not responding because the anxiety levels were so high. And now this, I know in hindsight, at that point, I did not know. So I was just, very upset and very worried. So I called one of my close friends whose husband is a doctor. And I said, this is what's happening. And what do you think we should do? And she said, okay, hold on, I'm going to find out. And came back to me with a recommendation for a psychiatrist to take him to a psychiatrist, which is when then we took the appointment and went to see the psychiatrist.
Okay. Sometimes diagnosis takes time, and it's a process until you finally get a diagnosis or you sort of figure out what it is. So in this case, was it fairly straightforward in terms of what it was, or was there a journey?
Actually not. It was pretty straightforward because we went to see a psychiatrist straight away, realizing it's something to do with his mental health. And his symptoms at that point were very visibly to do with OCD. as it is typically understood with cleanliness. And so the outward manifestation of it was pretty obvious. And so it was not very hard to diagnose it. And within one session, she realized what was happening with him. What I've learned subsequently is that OCD manifests in many different ways. Had it been another way where they're only mental compulsions, that's very, very hard to diagnose. In my son's case, it was easier.
How did it make you feel? As in, I don't actually know how early on an OCD diagnosis comes, but 9 feels like he was a very young boy at that time. And, all the development things are happening. How had you heard of OCD before? How did you feel about the diagnosis?
I had heard about OCD before, but not in a way that really, I thought about in depth. It's been portrayed in cinema and shows. Is talked about very kind of casually among friend circles. Somebody is, particular about their things and they're a little OCD. But I did not have an in-depth understanding of the disorder as it presents with my son till quite a bit later. So at some level, my lack of understanding helped in a way. Like I wasn't panicking at that point. I was just kind of overly stressed as a mother would be to find him the right help so that he wouldn't be so anxious. He was very anxious a lot. And I just wanted to help him with that.
Was there a certain amount of relief that that the doctors knew what it was?
I don't know if relief is the right word. It made sense. It made more sense, which I guess if things are explained to me, I feel, okay, I can handle this. So yeah, relief I didn't feel because then it's still something I had to
deal with,
help him cope with. Yeah.
And the rest of the family did, because in lots of families there's stigma, but how did the rest of your family respond? Grandparents also get very worried about their grandchildren and sometimes take part in the parenting process.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
So initially, I think my family was very supportive. There was never a question of not having their support. I think as the days and months progressed, the understanding of the disorder is what took time. And despite my trying to help them understand, there was like a gap of what he was actually experiencing or what we as a family were actually experiencing, and then their understanding of it, which is natural. They would make comments or offer suggestions or advice that would seem natural for a grandparent or a sibling or any family member to give you, but it wasn't really helpful in any way because the disorder is so bizarre. So as time went on, I guess I felt like it was not really helpful.
So the idea is obviously at no point to blame anybody because everyone tries their best and does the best that they can. And it's usually a lack of understanding or something else that sort of comes in the way. The reason I'm asking you about it, though, is that it's helpful to get more anecdotal examples of where there's that gap in communication and how that impacts your journey. Definitely everyone takes time to understand something that's new to them. And that'll obviously have an impact on life until that understanding is reached. So like, for example, you talked about how in the beginning you were not really panicking so much because you still didn't necessarily have an idea of what all OCD could comprise of, and maybe how long or up and down the journey could be. After the diagnosis, you all would then, I'm assuming, work towards the treatment plan. So, what did that look like, the change?
So initially, when he was diagnosed at 9, we were recommended talk therapy and some strategies at home, which we fulfilled, and we found a therapist, a child therapist for him. And there were periods of time where he was calmer, he was better able to cope, and then there were periods of time where it got worse. And what I didn't know at that time, but I know now, is that OCD comes in waves. So some of the waves could look like as you age. So the milestones when there's hormonal changes in your body, or there are physical changes in your outside world, whether you move from junior school to middle school. Any kind of big life changes could trigger a relapse, as they call it, where the symptoms become worse, the anxiety gets worse. So initially we were trying to manage it, and then from 9 to around 12, this went on where, I felt like we were just kind of firefighting a little bit, but we didn't know where the fire was coming from. And then at 12, he had a pretty significant relapse where he was not functioning well at all. And so we went back to the doctor. And at that point, she said, look, this is the onset of his hormonal changes, and I think we should start him on some medication. And at that point, I didn't know anything about medication for mental health. So there was a lot of resistance. I felt like, oh my God, he's only 12. And how do we, what does this look like? Did a little bit of research, and according to the doctor, an SSRI would have been the best choice because there's no known medication per se for OCD, but an SSRI used at a higher dose tends to calm the symptoms and help the person cope better. So because he was in so much distress and so much, it was just hard on a day-to-day basis for him, we decided, okay, let's start with this.
Can you tell me a little bit about what your day looked like between the ages of 9 and 12?
I was working. He was going to school. And we had staff at home, so we'd all kind of chip in to take care of him, and then I would try and be home at a reasonable hour. My husband works later hours, longer hours, so he would come back later. So I would always try and be home at, say, 4, 5 o'clock and be there for him. Some weeks were more demanding and I had to be present more. Some weeks he was coping better and it was okay. Like the first few months of the medication, things seemed to be, calm down. It took, I think, 4 weeks for it to kick in. And then when it did, he was much, much calmer. So then everybody was calmer. And the times where he was not, I would try and be more present at home. So I was kind of juggling both worlds, whether it was in the house or at work.
And when you say you had to be home and be present to take care of him, what did that taking care of look like?
So, I think it primarily was around the OCD, because the other stuff he could manage, whether he had to do a little bit of homework or he was had a friend over or was playing downstairs, he could manage all of that. There wasn't really any major intervention required at that point. But just to talk him through a stressful situation where, okay, my backpack is lying there and Mama, it has to be cleaned now. And so, okay, so we try and clean it for him. Or if my dog's snout touched his shoes, then the shoes and the dog or the dog's snout had to be cleaned. And honestly, the staff didn't realize what was going on, didn't understand what was going on. And I was kind of the go-between trying to help him because it would cause him so much distress. So my job was trying to make sure he was not that anxious in whatever way I could.
And then at 12?
So then at 12, things got really quite bad. I think he was not able to cope. We put him on the medication. I remember one time we decided to, let's take a family holiday. I think we had a day off, Friday off from school. And so for the weekend, we decided to go to Goa. And so we went to the airport, and at security, your stuff is checked and you have to open the bag and you have to remove your things. And he had a complete and utter meltdown at the airport. The security didn't know what was going on, but we had to take out, his computer, his video games, the cables, all of that is being touched by somebody else. And he was just really, 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 really upset and started crying, and everybody's watching us. We didn't know what is going on. And he had just started his medication, not even a week or 10 days before. And we didn't know what was happening at the airport. Both me and my husband are standing there. The child is melting down. The security line has stopped. And we were panic-stricken because we didn't know how to help him. He was hysterical, crying, rigid, shaking. We didn't know what to do. And then at that point, my husband said, I think you should call the doctor. So I said, oh, that's a good idea. So I called and I said, Doc, this is what's happened. And everybody is flipping out. And she said, Anissa, have you given him his meds this morning? And because we had just recently started his medication, I was not used to the protocol. And because of the travel, it just slipped my mind. So I said, no, I forgot. I completely forgot. So she said, okay, just give him his dose now and call me in 20 minutes.
And this was his SOS medication,
this
not
was his SOS medication, not the long-acting. So we convinced him. We said, please take your meds and this will make you feel better. And he did. And we just sat down and we just hoped and prayed that the anxiety would pass because it was very bad. I mean, I had never seen him like that. So we just waited, and they were going to call boarding soon. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to miss this flight, because he kept saying, I'm not going anywhere. I refuse to get on the plane. It was just all too much for him. So we waited. And then in 10 minutes, I could see him slowly calming down. And in 15, he was almost completely calm. And then he looks at me and he said, Mama, I'm okay now. Can I have a samosa? I'm really hungry. And I'm like, okay, yes, let's go get a samosa. So we go to the little shop there. And before boarding, we literally, he loves samosas. We bought him his samosa and his drink. And we got on the flight. And my husband and me are looking at each other and saying, what just happened? He was somebody else, and now he's back to being himself. And that's what anxiety does to you. It really messes with everything. So that was just to give you an idea of what it can look like. It was quite difficult for him. But then after that, we were quite, particular that, you have to take your meds on time and it will help you feel better and all that. So that was
And
the
in a
journey.
stressful situation, you want to preempt
Correct.
something like that.
Correct. Because he was little. He was 9, he was 12, but he's still a child. And you don't...
I think you're a child for many, many years after the age of 12 as well.
Yeah. And you don't realize what's happening to you. So, yeah, when he needed us to say, okay, hey, slow down. Let's do this. Let's take your meds and take a break,
I don't know what it was like for you, but I do know that a lot of times just the lengths and the chronicness of an illness can get very exhausting. You're waiting for it to get better, and especially the ones that cycle, it can get really exhausting when it comes back and you're like, oh my God, I have to do this all over again. And it can get frustrating. And, sometimes people around you are like, why is it not getting better? I feel like when there's a one-time thing, people get it and then they're there for you. But then after that, they expect it to go away. And with chronic things, it doesn't necessarily go away. And a lot of times it comes from worry. Like, I'm worried about you, and so I'm worried why this is not going away. And so, I'm just wondering what your conversations with him were like, having to figure it out for yourself, and then also be able to figure it out for him, because he's getting into teenagehood now.
Yeah.
His friends might be asking. It might, like you said, it happens in public spaces. You can't control when it happens.
So his first therapist, his child therapist, had given us a book which was made for children. It was quite well done for children to explain how your brain gets stuck in this loop and how the thought is repetitive and how the anxiety is lying to you, that it's actually not a bad thing, but you're fearful because it's lying to you. And so he had a basic understanding from the age of 9 when it was happening, but he always realized that he's different, right? He knew that this is not happening to my cousin and this is not happening to my friend. And he would often ask me, why is it happening to me? Mama, why me? I didn't have an answer to that, but we knew what was happening, and we'd kind of reiterate and help him process that. So he did have good insight, as they say, from the beginning, but I think his understanding of it got better as he grew older.
Yeah. I know that for you and for your son, it was a very long journey of trying to find the right kind of help and the right treatment. And often we assume that, if we have the financial resources, then you'll find the help. One of the realities of at least mental health care, around the world, but also in India, is that sometimes even if you have the financial resources, it's difficult to find the right kind of care, because access is a barrier across financial status. And so I just wanted to, if you could tell us a little bit about how it was up and down, and what were the various different things you had to try until you found something that, worked.
So yeah, finances can be a barrier. And in this case, at that point, so 15 years ago was when he was 9, the internet was around, but it was not something that people went to very quickly for medical advice. You might go there to Facebook to chat with your friends or whatever. But it wasn't a source of credible information. So honestly, I wish in hindsight that I had done a little more research about it. But at that point, given the circumstances, I just went with what I was advised by his doctors at that point. And so the talk therapy and the medication starting at 12, some of it helped. The medication definitely did ease the symptoms. But what I understand now is that OCD requires a form of cognitive behavioral therapy called ERP, which is exposure and response prevention. So if that is your first line of treatment when you're first diagnosed or when the symptoms are milder, you're training your brain to control it rather than have it control you. That part of the treatment, there was not a good understanding in India at that point, or at least our set of doctors did not know of it. It was not ever discussed. So, yeah, I think we found out about that much later. I would say 8-10 years later into his journey, by which time his symptoms had really escalated. So it was not for the lack of resources, financial resources, or access to doctors, but it was a lack of general understanding from the community about this particular disorder. I'm sure there are many like it. And today there's been a lot of advancement in research on the subject and access because of the internet. And I think post-COVID, people are far more willing to talk about mental health and mental well-being because so many of us are struggling. But before that, I would say 5 years ago even, the stigma was worse. It's better now. But in this case, in the case of my son's OCD, we didn't have all the information relevant to his case at an earlier stage. So what I understand now is that if we intervene with ERP at an earlier age, you can actually arrest the symptoms to a great deal, whereby you have a better understanding of how to deal with your intrusive thoughts in a timely and better manner. So we didn't have that information, and so we were actually doing a whole bunch of stuff wrong, like seriously wrong, and making the OCD worse or grow, and we didn't know. We found out much, much later when I started doing a whole bunch of research online and reading more books about it. And that's when I found out about accommodating the OCD that we had talked about. So, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what accommodating OCD means?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the anxiety is lying to you. It'll tell you stuff that makes you very anxious and very fearful even, but it's not real. Your brain is on a loop, right? So in our case, it was contamination OCD, and there's many kinds of OCD, but in my son's case, it was contamination OCD. So if he said, "Mama, that bag is dirty, it needs to be cleaned now," he's saying it out of fear, because if he doesn't clean it, then something bad will happen. That's what his brain is telling him. It's illogical, but you cannot fight the OCD with logic. You cannot tell your child, "Hey, don't be silly, that bag is fine, nothing's going to happen." His anxiety is just going to keep rising and keep rising till you clean it. If I go ahead and clean that bag for him, his anxiety drops. But I am accommodating the OCD. I'm accommodating his wish to keep that thing clean. What that does in turn in his brain is it gives the OCD permission to do it again and again. And the more you do it, the worse it gets, right? I did not know that. And of course, my son didn't know that. And the family didn't know that. And if he said, Didi, ye joote saaf karo, to Didi is cleaning the shoes. Not because she doesn't understand, right? None of us understood.
I mean, it goes against your basic
Intuitive response as a parent to take care of your child. So it is counterintuitive. This whole thing is you have to rearrange your brain to parent in a different way, if you will, in order for your child to feel better and get better. And, 10 years later, we had gone down this path not knowing this. So we were doing so many things wrong. And then we had to learn how to do them right. So that was a learning curve that really was very, very difficult.
You talked about, a particular incident of panic. What would you say has been the hardest part of the journey for you? Because I know that, you went to America, there was COVID, there were various times when, he was also in an inpatient facility for a bit, which means, for our listeners, it means he was admitted into a facility to be able to help him. So there were lots of various different attempts at different kinds of treatment. I can think of a bajillion things that would have been hard in terms of, just expectations of what you're supposed to be and able to do as a parent, to, it essentially taking over your whole life, to just generally being worried about your child. So for you, what do you think was the hardest part of the journey?
I think eventually it was accepting the fact that OCD is not something you can fix. Like miraculously, it's going to go away. It doesn't. You learn to manage it. That was really hard for the family to accept that he's going to have to learn to live with this. And the way we eventually came around to thinking about it was that, a lot of people have conditions that are chronic, that are long-standing, and that you have to learn to manage, whether it's diabetes or any other kind of chronic, long illness. But it's something you can manage. That realization and that acceptance, I think, was really hard to accept. Initially, when you get the diagnosis, you feel like, okay, now we have the meds, now everything is going to be okay. Or now we have this, now it's going to be okay. But it never gets okay because it kept coming in waves. Yeah, I think it's the acceptance that it's a chronic condition would have been the hardest.
And are there any particular instances where you're proud of how you handled the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I was like a warrior. I just okay, people don't understand, they have to understand. So I was on a mission to help people, starting with my family and close friends, to help them understand what is OCD, how it functions. So by which time I had gotten very good with the internet and got a whole bunch of information, resources, books, an amazing movie about children who have OCD. And yeah, I remember having a little family movie night where we watched this movie. I think it was 18, 20-minute long documentary on what's happening in my son's head at that point. But it was also really nice to see the willingness of the entire family and friends to want to learn, because they did want to learn and be supportive.
I know that you, have parent groups that you have either formed or are part of. I was wondering what, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the different role that, say, peers play in the support circle of you being able to talk to other parents or you being able to talk to other caregivers, versus the role of a professional, both, of course, being important. But I feel like from all the people I know, you've been the most active in terms of accessing and pushing for and promoting peer support.
Yeah, I think both have an important role to play, but I felt, when throughout my journey, because of the nature of OCD and the lack of understanding of it, there was really no support. For me, as a parent, as a caregiver, I was just in my head in this echo chamber of, oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh my God, okay, let's do this. But had I had a friend to say, hey, have you had this experience? This is what I'm experiencing right now. Then that conversation kind of lightens the load. And I don't know of any actual OCD support group for caregivers in India. Maybe there are, I'm not sure, but I haven't been part of one. And so during COVID, or just after, when we came back from the States and his treatment was not successful and he was at home, I don't know how it is that's when a lot of young adults and young children were having mental health issues. And so there was a lot of conversation about it on WhatsApp groups, on phone calls, with doctors and therapists. And so I thought, okay, there was one person, then there was a second person, and there was a third person. So I said, okay, let me just make a WhatsApp group so we can chat with each other. And it sort of organically happened to be this casual WhatsApp group for OCD and anxiety, because some other anxiety could, people with it could benefit from our conversations. And so it started that way. But yeah, I think I wish there were more support groups for caregivers. And I feel also for the person struggling with the disorder, because it's very isolating. And if you have a peer who's going through what you're going through, it's like magically, okay, I'm not alone, and that really helps. And in terms of the professional part of it, the doctors did guide me. And then eventually I was able to find a couple of doctors who were really, really helpful. And listened very carefully to what we were experiencing, what I was saying as a mother, what my child was saying, and being thorough about further investigation. Unfortunately, it all happened a little too late in our case, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm so pushy and so vocal about it, is because if you get to it earlier, then the intervention can really be very, very helpful and not have to wait. I remember the statistics. 10 years ago, the statistics were crazy that an average person who has OCD, it takes them 17 years to find the right kind of help. Okay, I'm talking about 10 years ago. Now, it's very different. And I looked at that and I said, oh my God, that is just nuts, right? So, yeah, I think we just, need to be more open and talk about stuff and help each other.
Yeah. Early intervention in all sorts of...
In
any
everything.
Illness, plays a really big part in how well the treatment works.
Right.
I heard a really nice quote that said, the longer you stay on the wrong train, the more expensive it is to come back home.
There you go.
And I was like,
that's perfect.
That makes a lot of sense. And then I wonder why it's taking me so long to come back home. It's because you went in the other direction for that much time. So you need to, account for the... Yeah. Were there any issues? I mean, in terms of, say with your husband, in terms of did you have different opinions or parenting styles?
Yeah. So we've been through many rounds of trying to find him the right help. We had gone to the US for exposure and response prevention therapy. Unfortunately, that was just before COVID hit. He was in residential treatment there. It didn't work. We came back. He got worse. And yeah, me and my husband do have very different personalities and do have slightly different parenting styles. But I think what we always agree on is his well being, his safety, and we just rally around that. So if he's got a crazy job, which he does, and he needs more time in the office, then I take over at home and I had to quit my job. But he would then in the evenings come home and give me some time to just be, because it's, full-time job doing what I was doing. So there was a great understanding of this goal that we had to achieve. So there was no, it was hard. It sounds in a few sentences like it was doable, but yeah, it was hard, but we were determined that this is what has to be done.
I mean, I know you just said that it was very clear that you wanted to do whatever it took to make sure that your son was okay. But I would imagine that sending him away would have been hard to do, even if you know logically that this is something that's going to help him.
Yeah. So when we eventually found the most recent place, this treatment center is in Malaysia. It was just after COVID in 2021, and I accidentally came upon this place. Now, it wasn't the perfect place to treat OCD per se. It was a treatment facility for young adults. That sounded very appealing to me because then he has peers, his own age group. So I actually proposed this to him and I said, look, you're really not getting well. And he wanted to get well, and he was frustrated and tired and exhausted. And he's much older now, right? He's 19, 20. And he said, yeah, Mama, I really I want to get well. So there was that he always wanted to fight for himself. So I said, right, I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to this country and I'm going to check out this facility because I'm not doing something wrong again, because we've had so many failures that I wasn't sure how this would go. So I actually went there, met the people, and it seemed like, okay, they knew what they were doing. Came back, told him about it, told my husband about it. And I think, honestly, we had no other choice. There was nothing here. He was literally disintegrating in front of our eyes, and we had nothing, no help. So it was a really very frustrating, helpless situation. And he said, okay, I'll go. So when he said, okay, I'll go, then everybody was on board, because we're not pushing him to do something that he doesn't want to do. And so that's how we took the initial step and got him some Zoom calls with them, and then got on a flight and went there. And yes, it's in another country, but what choice did we have? It was hard. At the same time, we were very hopeful that, okay, maybe this will work, So, yeah.
And it did.
I'd do it over again. Yeah.
I know that now, he's back and he's doing well. I wanted to ask two questions. One is, I'm sure there were times where you felt very helpless and stuck. Is there anything that helped you through it, or did you just wait for it to pass?
Many things helped, not just one thing, but I think supportive family and friends, that's a big component. Plus, a parent is just not willing to give up. You just keep going. I guess it's in our DNA. That's what parenting is about. So,
I don't necessarily mean that there was ever an option to give up, but I mean that you can still have moments where you feel helpless and stuck. And it's not like the intent is that you would ever give up, but there are hard days and there are hard
yeah.
weeks. And you get exhausted.
Yeah.
And there are times when doubt creeps into your mind, those sorts of things.
Yeah, there were very dark days, years actually, sometimes, months and years, where nothing was working. And it was difficult. I was, at that point, when he was very bad, post high school, when he had to drop out of school, I had to quit working because there was just, no choice. And I didn't do so well at all. I didn't realize at that point, but I was depressed. I was not exercising. I was not taking care of myself. All the things that I love to do, whether it was my drawing, my book club, my work, everything just kind of fell away. And this was my only role, which was really quite detrimental to me. Now, when he went to Malaysia for treatment, did everybody around me were like, okay, Anissa, get it together now, because you have the time, you have to. My husband was like, at me, you need to get to the gym, you need to go see a therapist, you need, and I did, slowly but surely, being pushed by everybody, I did. And yeah, even the doctors, at the point when we were stuck in America, I was just like, Doc, I need some help. Give me some meds. I couldn't function. I was really, cooking and cleaning and therapy for a child who's unwell during COVID. It was really a nightmare. So the meds, the support, the friends, the doctors, the getting back on track, the exercising, all of that eventually brought me back.
Often in the mental health space, people tell you that you are more than your illness, and you are more than your illness. And in general, all human beings are dynamic, and there are multiple things all into one. So you are a mother and a friend and many things. And while it is very important to remember that you are more than your illness, it is a reality that when you have a chronic illness, or when you have a chronic illness, it can overpower a lot of other things just because you have to deal with it and you have to learn to manage it. And until you reach a certain place, it can take up a big part of your life, and it can become a dominant part of your personality, not only because of the illness, but because of everything you learned because of the illness and managing the illness, right? Like, I would say that I'm a very different person than I would otherwise have turned out to be if I didn't have to learn all the things that I learned because of my depression. So if you had to just think about life so far, how do you feel in yourself, and how do you feel about life right now and life so far?
That's a really big question, Ira.
I know. Take your time. No rush.
Yes, I mean, all of us, I guess, life is a journey. We know that. And you learn many, many different things along the way. I think I have grown and learned a lot due to my circumstances, unique circumstances, which I don't think I ordinarily would have learned. So yeah, it's organically become this way. given my particular life. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I guess, there's so many things I'm able to contribute because of what I have learned. Now, I don't know that I would have learned it otherwise if my life had gone down another path. But yeah, so I have a lot to offer, a lot that I have learned. And yeah, and now that I have a little more time, I think I was quite inspired by your little drawings, and I've been drawing. So I think I might want to go back to some of the stuff that I used to do earlier. And explore that some. So I'm quite excited about that aspect of it.
Yeah. If you could just, because I know that you're a big proponent of this and that it's been a big part of, you're very actively, and I have to say you're doing really well at it, learning to set your boundaries and taking care of yourself. I'm very impressed. You have come a long way. So if you could just tell us a little bit about how important that is in a caregiver's, in everybody's life, but specifically in a caregiver's life.
So, I think it also matters how you're built inherently. So some people have a stronger sense of self, some people don't. But either which way, I think one tends to lose focus when you're caring for someone who needs your help, especially a family member or a child. And I think it's important that you be there for them, of course, and advocate for them and do what's necessary and what you want to. But in the process, not forget about yourself. I think a lot of the time that happens, because there's not time or resources, or your mind is just filled with so much stuff, information and worry and the rest of it, that you tend to lose focus on yourself. So to continue on an everyday basis to focus a little bit on yourself, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's drawing every day, whether it's writing in your journal, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's talking to friends. I had someone in a support group who was the cutest thing, and she said, I was like, so what would you like to do for yourself? And she said, I want to go shopping. And so go shopping, whatever floats your boat, do it. Don't forget about yourself and your health, because my health was just down the tube. And it took me 3 years to bring it back up to where I am today. So I think it's important to not just focus on the other, but focus on yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
Tricky.
But you're there now.
I'm there now.
Last question is, if there's something that you could tell other parents of children with OCD, what would it be?
Yeah, I think a few things that are important if you notice a loved one displaying OCD symptoms. And this can happen in childhood from a very young age to puberty to even adulthood, because the onset of OCD can happen whenever there is a major shift in life or there's a big occasion. Apparently, even if you have your first child, you could suddenly be very anxious and start having OCD-like symptoms. So age is not, it can happen at any age. But one thing you do have to be mindful of is to educate yourself. If you're a caregiver or you feel like you're having some symptoms that could be OCD-like, there are a lot of resources available. So educate, and understand how it works. That's the first thing. And second, for parents of children with OCD or younger children with OCD or even older, is that your child is not the disorder. It's an important distinction to make, because, when you have a physical ailment, it's easier to see that, okay, my child has diabetes or my child has XYZ. It is separate from the personality of the child. Now, in mental health, there is no separate, and you can't see it, but it is affecting how you act and behave and think and feel. And so just remember that if your child is acting out of anxiety or acting out of fear and is having a meltdown or lashing out, it's not the child speaking. It is the disorder. And that took me a while. You can get offended or scared or upset. So remember that your child is not the disorder. That's an important distinction to make. And there's a ton of resources out there. So just speak about it, advocate for it, learn about it. Yeah. And don't isolate, because somebody could need your help and you could help someone with the same thing.
Yeah. Thanks. That was really sweet. This is, as of now, a happy story. Because even though there were many years of struggle, now he's much better.
He's much better, yes.
Goes scuba diving.
Yes, he loves to dive.
And recently gave his driver's exam.
Oh my God, that was funny. Yeah, he's thinking about buying a second-hand car to drive in Bombay. I'm like, okay, really? So that might happen. Yeah.
So there's hope out there.
There is hope.
And it can be hard. And listen to Anissa. The last thing that I do with all my guests is that I do a little activity.
Okay.
So you know about Agatsu, and you know that we have something that we call emotional hygiene. Mm-hmm. And one of the parts of that is to remind ourselves that we can often get caught up in the negative because we want to save ourselves from threat. And so the idea for the activity today is I'll give you a clipboard, and I'll have a clipboard, and we write down one thing that from this morning to now, only this morning to now, that went not bad. It was okay. Because it's very easy we very often focus on the things that didn't go so well. Mm-hmm. We forget that there are a bunch of neutral things that happened as well, and a bunch of good things that happened. So that's the idea.
How many things do you want?
As many as you feel like. Okay. Do you want to go first?
Okay. So, number one, I had a really good night's sleep. And with menopause, I can't tell you, that's a good thing to have because a lot of nights are not. I keep waking up, but I slept well. So that was good. Then I had 2 amazing cups of coffee at home. I love coffee, so that was good. And then I had many hugs from all 3 of my boys this morning. 3 of them is husband, son, doggy. All 3 are boys. And I can't say a super chat with Ira and her super supportive team.
Well, now you've said it. We'll take it.
Yeah. And there's a yay.
That's great. And I love your handwriting. Okay. Mine is that I got up early, brushed my teeth, got ready, and then I hopped my way to Popeye to get love.
Oh, so you got hugs. You wrote hugs too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hugs are very important.
They are. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ira. It was really nice to talk to you.
Thank you for watching The Curious Case Off with me. In the description below, there will be links, further reading, summaries, guidelines, resources, everything that we could find and put together that we think you might find helpful. Just to reiterate that everything that is said in the episode as well as in the resources below should not be used to self-diagnose. If you have any questions or queries, please reach out to a mental health professional who is qualified. And if you like the episode, then like, share and subscribe to Agatsu Foundation, our YouTube channel. And if you want to know anything more about the organization, then you can find out at www.agatsufoundation.org.